My name is David Carson, and I have been working as a park ranger in Great Smoky Mountains National Park for over 12 years. Frankly, as much as I love my job, it can be really tough at times. The incident I'm about to tell you about took place in the summer of 1994. Whenever I recall those 3 weeks, I wake up in a cold sweat with nightmares, and my heart races as if I'm still reliving that moment. It's as if I'm standing on the edge of the restricted area above Clingman's Dome. Before I continue, if you subscribe to our channel and like it, you will be doing us a huge favor in supporting us, and please share your thoughts about the story in the comments. If you've visited the Smokies, you must know Clingman's Dome. At 6,643 feet, it is the highest point in the park and the third highest mountain east of the Mississippi. Every year, thousands of tourists flock here, climb the spiral observation tower, and take pictures with the endless, magnificent mountain ridges disappearing into the blue haze that gave these ancient mountains their name as a backdrop. If you have the opportunity, it is definitely one of those places you should visit at least once in your lifetime. But there is something these tourists don't know, something the authorities go to great lengths to keep them from knowing. There is a reason why the road ends there. If you look closely at the official park maps, you will notice that certain areas above the dome are marked as prohibited wilderness areas, without any explanation. And of course, there is a reason for this. I learned about this restricted area during orientation at the Sugar Lands Visitor Center during my first week on the job. Bill Hutchins, a senior ranger who had been working in the park since 1971, pulled me aside after the standard training session. "Carson," he said, his face more serious than usual from the grueling pace of the week's work, "we need to talk about something that isn't in the handbooks." He took me to his office, a small room smelling of old pine and coffee, which was perfectly reasonable if you liked minimal standards. The walls were covered with topographic maps, and he pointed to one showing the area around Clingman's Dome. With his finger, he drew a rough circle about 2 miles in diameter, encompassing the ridgeline and forested area above and northeast of the dome. "Do you see this area?" he asked. "From here to here, the area with an elevation of about 6,000 to 6,800 feet?" I studied the contour lines and said, "Yes. We call this the Forbidden Zone. If you hear that someone has gone missing there, don't go alone. Call me first, day or night. Do you understand?" "Why?" I asked. "What's there?" Bill was silent for a long time, looking at the map. "Things that shouldn't be there," he said finally. "Things that were here long before the park, long before the Cherokee, maybe even long before humans started walking these ridges." I thought he was hazing the new guy, trying to spook me with some backwoods legend. But the look in his eyes told me different. This wasn't a joke. Bill Hutchins, a man who'd faced down black bears and rescued dozens of lost hikers from certain death, was genuinely afraid of something up there. For the first 2 years, I followed Bill's rule without question. Whenever we got reports of strange lights above the dome, or when hikers claimed to hear impossible sounds echoing down from the Forbidden Zone, I'd log the report and file it away. The official response was always the same: atmospheric phenomena, wildlife, the acoustic peculiarities of mountain terrain. We had a dozen scientific explanations ready to deploy. But in June of 1994, everything changed. It started with a missing hiker named Jennifer Walsh. She was 28, an experienced outdoorswoman from Asheville who'd been hiking the Appalachian Trail solo. Her last known location was the Clingman's Dome parking area, where her car was found 3 days after she'd failed to check in with her family. The visitor log at the observation tower had her signature, dated June 15th, 3:47 p.m. Standard procedure kicked in immediately. Search and rescue teams combed the established trails. Dogs tracked her scent to a point about half a mile north of the dome, where it simply vanished. Not gradually faded, vanished like she'd been plucked off the earth. I was part of the search team on day 4 when we found her pack. It was Tyler Morrison, a ranger from the Cades Cove district, who spotted it first. "Got something," he called out, his voice echoing through the thick stands of Fraser fir. The pack was sitting upright against a tree, about 300 yards into the forbidden zone. It was perfectly arranged, like someone had carefully set it down and planned to come right back. Everything inside was meticulously organized. Her clothes folded, her food supplies untouched, her water bottles still full. But Jennifer was nowhere to be found. That's when we heard it. A sound that made every hair on my body stand on end. It started low, almost below the range of human hearing, a thrumming that seemed to come from the ground itself. Then it rose in pitch, becoming a keening wail that sounded almost like singing, but in no language I'd ever heard. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Bill, who was leading the search that day, immediately ordered everyone back. "Fall back to the trail," he commanded, his voice cutting through our shocked paralysis. "Now!" We retreated, but I couldn't help looking back. Through the trees in the direction the sound had come from, I saw something that still defies explanation. The air itself seemed to shimmer and bend, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. But the temperature was barely 60 degrees. And in that shimmer, just for a moment, I could have sworn I saw structures. Tall, impossible spires that seemed to be made of something between glass and shadow. Back at the ranger station, Bill debriefed us with unusual intensity. "What you saw up there," he said, "you didn't see. What you heard, you didn't hear. The official report will state that the search was suspended due to dangerous weather conditions. Everyone clear?" We all nodded, but I could see the questions in everyone's eyes. Tyler finally voiced what we were all thinking. "Bill, what the hell is up there?" Bill looked older than I'd ever seen him. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I can tell you what I've learned in 23 years of trying to figure it out. Whatever's up there has been there longer than us. The Cherokee knew about it. They called this place the Wall Between Worlds and wouldn't hunt above certain elevations. The early European settlers had stories too, about people vanishing, about strange lights and sounds, about time moving differently up there." He pulled out a thick folder from his desk, weathered and yellowed with age. "This is every incident report from the Forbidden Zone since the park was established in 1934. 60 years of disappearances, sightings, and encounters that we've kept from the public." I spent that night reading through the folder, and what I found chilled me more than that otherworldly sound in the forest. The reports were remarkably consistent across decades. Hikers reporting paths that weren't there before and weren't there when they tried to return, time distortions. People swearing they'd been gone for hours when only minutes had passed, or vice versa. Structures glimpsed through the trees that couldn't exist, sounds of civilization, machinery, voices, music, coming from deep wilderness where no one could possibly be. And always, always the disappearances. 1 or 2 every few years, people who walked into the Forbidden Zone and never walked out. The most disturbing report was from 1967. A ranger named Michael Prescott had gone into the zone alone, against all protocols, searching for his missing fiancée. He was found 3 days later, sitting on a rock at the edge of the zone, catatonic. When he finally spoke, weeks later in a psychiatric hospital, he claimed he'd found a city up there. A vast city of impossible architecture, inhabited by things that weren't quite human. He said they'd offered to let him stay, to show him the true nature of the mountains, but he'd fled. His fiancée, he said, had chosen differently. She'd chosen to stay. Prescott never returned to work. Last anyone heard, He'd moved to Florida, as far from mountains as he could get. As I closed the folder that night, I made a decision that would prove to be either the bravest or stupidest of my life. I was going to find Jennifer Walsh, and if that meant entering the Forbidden Zone alone, so be it. The next morning, before dawn, I geared up. I told myself I was just going to scout the perimeter, maybe venture a few 100 yards in. I packed extra batteries for my flashlight and radio, though something told me technology might not work properly up there. I brought my service weapon, though I suspected it would be useless against whatever I might encounter. Most importantly, I brought a GPS unit and a traditional compass, and I marked my starting point with bright orange surveyor's tape. The forest was different inside the zone. I noticed it immediately. The usual morning birdsong was absent, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to swallow sound. The trees, those ancient Fraser firs that had survived ice ages and countless storms, grew in patterns that hurt to look at directly, their branches forming geometric arrangements that seemed almost deliberate. I'd been hiking for maybe an hour, carefully marking my path with tape every 50 feet, when I found the first sign of Jennifer. It was a hair tie, the distinctive purple one I'd seen in the missing person report, caught on a branch at eye level. But the branch was on a tree that I could have sworn wasn't there when I'd looked in that direction moments before. That's when I heard her voice. "Help me, please, someone help me." It was coming from deeper in the zone, maybe 200 yards ahead. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the voice sounded so desperate, so human in this inhuman place. I followed the voice, moving carefully through the increasingly bizarre forest. The trees were wrong now in ways I couldn't quite define. Too symmetrical, too perfect, like someone's idea of what trees should look like rather than what they actually were. The ground beneath my feet felt solid enough, but when I looked down, I sometimes caught glimpses of depth beneath the forest floor, as if I were walking on glass over an infinite drop. The voice led me to a clearing that shouldn't have existed. The trees formed a perfect circle, and in the center was Jennifer Walsh. She was sitting on the ground, rocking back and forth, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her clothes were torn, her hair matted with dirt and leaves, but she was alive. "Jennifer!" I called out, starting toward her. She looked up at me, and the relief in her eyes was quickly replaced by terror. "No!" she screamed. "Don't come any closer. It's a trap. They make me call out, make me bring people here." I stopped, my hand instinctively moving to my weapon. Who? Who makes you?" "The ones who built this place," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The ones who've been here since before the mountains were mountains. They need us, need our reality, I think, to anchor themselves here. Every person they take makes them more solid, more real in our world." That's when I saw them, emerging from between the trees like shadows gaining substance. They were tall, impossibly thin, with features that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them. Their eyes, if you could call them eyes, were points of light that seemed to look through me rather than at me. One of them spoke, or rather, I heard its words in my mind without sound. "Another anchor." Good. The configuration requires 7 more before the alignment is complete. I understood then what Bill had been protecting us from all these years. These things, whatever they were trying to cross over fully into our world, and they were using missing hikers as some kind of dimensional anchors, holding open a door that should have remained closed. "Run!" Jennifer screamed. "Run and don't look back. Tell them to seal the zone. Tell them—" Her words were cut off as one of the entities touched her shoulder and she froze mid-sentence, her face locked in an expression of horror. I ran like I'd never run before, crashing through the underbrush, following my orange tape markers when I could find them, relying on pure instinct when I couldn't. Behind me, I could hear them following, not footsteps exactly, but a sound like reality itself was being torn and reformed with each movement they made. My radio crackled to life, impossible, since I was well out of range of any tower. Bill's voice came through, distorted but recognizable. "Carson, if you can hear this, follow the sound of my voice. We've got the entire team at the zone boundary. Just keep moving toward us." I didn't question how he knew where I was or what was happening. I just ran toward his voice, transmitted through static and interference. The forest around me was changing, reality becoming more fluid. Trees moved like liquid, the ground rippled like water, and through it all, those things pursued me. I burst out of the forbidden zone like a swimmer breaking the surface, gasping for air. Bill and 5 other rangers were there, weapons drawn, forming a line between me and the zone. "Did you find her?" Bill asked, not taking his eyes off the tree line. "She's alive," I gasped out. "But they have her." "Bill, those things, they're trying to cross over. They're using people as anchors." He nodded grimly. "We know." "We've always known. Why do you think we keep people out? Then why don't we do something? Why don't we tell people?" "Tell them what?" Bill asked. "That there are interdimensional beings trying to invade our reality through a weak spot in the mountains? You think anyone would believe us? And if they did, you think the government wouldn't turn this place into Area 51 East? The only thing keeping those things contained is that they need willing anchors, people who enter the zone of their own free will. As long as we keep people out, they can't complete whatever ritual or process they're attempting." "But Jennifer is lost," Bill said flatly. "Just like the 63 others over the years. We can't save them. All we can do is prevent more from being taken." That night, I sat in my cabin trying to process what I'd experienced. I thought about Jennifer, trapped in that nightmare realm, being used as a living anchor point for beings that shouldn't exist in our world. I thought about all the missing hikers over the years, all the families who never got closure. And I thought about what Bill had said, that they needed willing anchors. The next morning, I went to Bill with a plan. It was insane, probably suicidal, but I couldn't leave Jennifer and the others to their fate. "What if we could break their hold?" I asked. "What if we could disrupt whatever process they're using?" Bill looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Carson, you don't understand. People have tried. In 1978, a team of rangers went in with explosives, thinking they could destroy whatever physical structures were up there. Only one came back, and he spent the rest of his life in a psychiatric facility. In 1985, someone tried using electromagnetic pulses, thinking it might disrupt their dimensional stability. The entire team vanished, and we found their equipment fused into the rocks like it had been there for millions of years." "But what if—" "No," Bill said firmly. "I know what you're thinking, and the answer is no. We maintain the perimeter, we keep people out, and we hope to God that's enough." But I couldn't let it go. Over the next week, I researched everything I could about the Forbidden Zone. I read through indigenous legends, geological surveys, and even fringe physics papers about dimensional rifts and parallel worlds. And slowly, a pattern emerged. The Cherokee legends were the most revealing. They spoke of the Nunehi, the people who live anywhere, spirit beings who existed between worlds. But older stories, ones that predated even the Cherokee, told of something else. The Atsildihiagi, which roughly translated to the fire that burns between. These beings were described as neither good nor evil, but utterly alien, existing in a state that was neither fully here nor fully there. According to one legend I found in the University of Tennessee's archives, there was a way to close the door between worlds. It required a sacrifice, not of life, but of memory. Someone would have to enter the zone carrying the collective memory of all those taken, and then willingly forget everything, creating a kind of psychic void that would collapse the dimensional bridge. It sounded insane, but no more insane than the reality I'd witnessed. I started preparing in secret. I recorded everything, every name from the missing persons files, every detail about their lives I could find. I spoke to families claiming I was working on a memorial project. I gathered photographs, personal items, anything that would strengthen the connection to those who'd been taken. Sarah Chen was one of the people I interviewed. Her brother Michael had vanished in 1989. He was obsessed with the mountains, she told me, holding a worn photograph of a young man standing at the Klingman's Dome observation tower. Said he could hear them calling to him. The night before he disappeared, he called me and said he'd figured something out, something about the true nature of reality. He sounded so excited, but also scared. The next morning, his tent was found just inside what you rangers call the restricted area. Empty, story after story, I collected them all. Each missing person became real to me. Not just a name in a file, but someone's family, someone's love, someone's loss. Marcus Thompson, vanished 1976, left behind a wife and 2 kids. Elena Rodriguez, 1983, a botanist who'd been studying the unique ecosystem of the high-altitude forests. James and Patricia Winters, 1991, newlyweds on their honeymoon who'd ignored the warning signs and ventured off trail. The list went on. 3 weeks after my first encounter with the Forbidden Zone, I was ready. I'd compiled everything onto a digital recorder. Hours of names, stories, memories. I'd also written it all down in a notebook, backing up the backup. The plan was simple in concept, if not execution. Enter the zone, find the entities, play the recordings to establish the connection to all the anchors, then use a combination of drugs I'd acquired to induce temporary amnesia. The drugs were the hardest part to obtain. Through a contact at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, I'd gotten hold of an experimental combination of benzodiazepines and other memory-affecting compounds. The cocktail wouldn't cause permanent damage, but it would create a temporary state of complete memory suppression. About 6 to 8 hours where I would retain no memories at all, old or new. I left a detailed letter for Bill, to be opened if I didn't return within 48 hours. I explained everything, the theory, the plan, and why I had to try. On July 2nd, 1994, at 3 a.m., I entered the Forbidden Zone for the second time. The forest was different at night. The wrongness I'd felt during my first visit was amplified tenfold. The trees seemed to pulse with a bioluminescent glow that shouldn't exist in these species. The ground beneath my feet felt unstable, as if I were walking on a membrane stretched over in vast emptiness. I followed the path I'd taken before, or tried to. The landscape kept shifting, paths appearing and disappearing, trees moving when I wasn't looking directly at them. My compass spun wildly, and my GPS showed me being in multiple locations simultaneously. Then I heard them, voices calling from the darkness. Not just Jennifer this time, but dozens of them. All the missing hikers, all the anchors, crying out in a harmony that was both beautiful and terrifying. "This way," they seemed to say. "Come to us. Join us. Complete the pattern." I followed the voices, the recorder playing continuously in my pack, broadcasting the names and stories of everyone who'd been taken. The forest reacted to the recordings. The air shimmered, reality rippled, and I could feel something vast and alien turning its attention toward me. The clearing appeared suddenly, as if it had been dropped into place from above. But this time, it wasn't empty. All of them were there, every missing person from the last 60 years. They stood in concentric circles, their eyes glowing with that same otherworldly light I'd seen in the entities. Jennifer was in the center, and when she saw me, her expression was one of profound sadness. "You shouldn't have come back," she said, her voice carrying despite the distance. "Now you'll be trapped like us." "I'm here to free you," I called out, still playing the recordings. "All of you." That's when they appeared. The entities. There were more of them this time. Dozens, maybe hundreds, their tall forms seeming to stretch up into the sky itself. They moved between the anchors like shepherds among sheep. The one that had spoken to me before approached. This time, its mental voice was clearer, more defined. "You bring the memory of all." Good. This will strengthen the configuration exponentially. The door will open fully. I realized then that I'd misunderstood. The entities didn't just need anchors. They needed connections, memories, bonds between our world and theirs. By bringing all these memories here, I wasn't weakening their hold. I was about to make it unbreakable, but I'd come too far to stop. "You're right," I said, pulling out the syringes I'd prepared. "But memories can be forgotten. Connections can be severed." I injected myself with the amnesia cocktail before they could stop me. The effect wasn't immediate. I had maybe 30 seconds before my mind would start to fade. The entities reacted violently. Reality itself seemed to scream. The anchors, the missing people, began to move toward me, their faces twisted in expressions of fear and urgency. "No!" one of the entities commanded, its mental voice now tinged with something like panic. "You don't understand what you're doing. Without the memories, without the connections, the configuration will collapse. This entire dimensional pocket will implode." Jennifer reached me first, grabbing my arms. "David, please, if you forget us, we won't just die. We'll never have existed. We'll be erased from reality itself." The drugs were starting to work. I could feel my memories beginning to slip away like sand through fingers. But in those last moments of clarity, I understood the true horror of the situation. These people weren't just trapped, they were suspended between existence and non-existence. Their memories, held by the outside world, were the only things keeping them real. If I forgot them, if the world forgot them, they would cease to have ever been. But the alternative was worse. Every year, more people would be taken. The entities would eventually gather enough anchors to fully manifest in our world. And then, I didn't want to imagine what would happen then. "I'm sorry," I whispered, as my vision began to blur and my thoughts became disconnected. "I'm so sorry." The last thing I remember clearly is the sound, like reality itself was tearing apart. The anchors were screaming. The entities were doing something that might have been screaming if they'd had voices, and the forest was collapsing in on itself. Then, nothing. I woke up in a hospital bed in Gatlinburg 2 days later. Bill was there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "What happened?" I asked, my throat dry and raw. "We found you at the edge of the forbidden zone," he said carefully. "You were unconscious, suffering from exposure and dehydration. You'd been missing for 48 hours. Missing. But I tried to remember, but there was nothing. A complete blank. I don't remember anything." Bill studied me for a long moment. "The doctors say you had some kind of episode. Temporary amnesia, probably brought on by a head injury. You had quite a bump on your skull." I reached up and felt the bandage I hadn't noticed before. "Did something happen? In the park?" "Nothing important," Bill said. But there was something in his eyes. Relief mixed with profound sadness. "Just get some rest, Carson." Over the next few weeks I recovered physically, but the gap in my memory remained. I returned to work, but things were different. The Forbidden Zone was still restricted, but when I asked Bill about it, he looked confused. Forbidden Zone. You mean the wilderness area above Klingman's? That's just to protect the fragile ecosystem up there. The Fraser firs are barely hanging on as it is with the balsam woolly adelgid infestation. I checked the files, the ones I remembered reading about all the disappearances. They were different now. The disappearances were still there, but they had explanations. Natural causes. Falls. Exposure. Wildlife attacks. Normal, tragic, but explainable deaths in a vast wilderness park. The folder about the Forbidden Zone that Bill had shown me? It didn't exist. When I carefully brought it up, he looked at me with genuine concern and suggested I might still be suffering effects from my accident. But sometimes, late at night, I have dreams. Dreams of people I don't recognize standing in circles in an impossible forest. Dreams of tall, thin figures made of shadow and light. Dreams of a woman with torn clothes and desperate eyes saying, "Don't forget us. Please, don't forget us." I started researching on my own time. I found inconsistencies in the park records, missing person reports that didn't quite add up, gaps in the timeline, photographs in the archives where the background seemed wrong, like something had been edited out, not digitally, but from reality itself. There was one photograph that particularly haunted me. It was from the Klingman's Dome Observation Tower, dated June 15th, 1994. In the foreground, a family of tourists smiled at the camera, but in the background, where the mountains stretched into the distance, there was an odd distortion. If you looked at it just right, it almost looked like structures. Tall, impossible spires that seemed to be made of something between glass and shadow. I tried enhancing the photo, but every time I got close to making out details, the image would corrupt. Not the file. The physical photograph itself would blur, as if reality was protecting itself from scrutiny. I found other rangers who remembered things differently. Not many, and they were reluctant to talk. But there were whispers. Stories of a time when the mountains were different. When there was something up there that shouldn't have been. When people disappeared and never came back. Tyler Morrison, the ranger who'd been with me on that search and rescue mission I barely remembered, pulled me aside one day. "You did something," he said quietly. "I don't know what, and most days I can't even remember that there's something to remember. But sometimes, especially when I'm up near the dome, I get these flashes, images of things that couldn't exist, sounds that shouldn't be possible. And your face, Carson, always your face, like you were at the center of something important." I asked him to tell me more, but he shook his head. "I can't. It's like trying to hold water. The harder I grip, the faster it slips away. But whatever you did, I think you saved us from something. The mountains feel quieter now. Safer. Like a door that was opening got slammed shut." As the months passed, I noticed other changes. The tourism numbers for Klingman's Dome increased dramatically. Families hiked freely in areas that I could have sworn were once restricted. The trail maps showed paths I didn't remember existing. But the strangest thing was the missing person statistics. For 60 years, Great Smoky Mountains National Park had averaged 2 to 3 unexplained disappearances per year, always in the high elevation areas. But after July 1994, that number dropped to 0. Not fewer. 0. As if whatever had been taking people was gone, or had never been there at all. I tried to investigate the families of the missing hikers I remembered. The Chens, the Thompsons, all the others. Some I couldn't find at all. No records, no social media, nothing. Others existed but had different stories. Sarah Chen, who I clearly remembered interviewing about her missing brother, had no brother. When I carefully asked her about it, she looked at me strangely and said she'd always been an only child. "I've been researching since before you arrived. The Forbidden Zone isn't unique. There are similar places around the world: the Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Sea off Japan, the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts. They're all thin spots, places where our reality touches others. The entities you encountered aren't evil, just incompatible with our existence. They're trying to cross over not out of malice, but out of necessity. Their reality is dying, collapsing in on itself. The anchors, the missing people, were their way of creating stable points between worlds. Your amnesia gambit was brilliant but temporary. Memory isn't just in the mind. It's in the land, in the quantum fabric of reality itself. The mountains remember, even if we don't. There's only one permanent solution, and it's why I never tried it myself. Someone has to go through. Someone has to cross over completely and seal the door from the other side. It's a one-way trip. In my desk at the station, bottom drawer, false back, you'll find everything I've gathered over the years. Use it wisely. And Carson, if you do what I think you might have to do, know that you're the bravest damn ranger I ever worked with. Bill. I drove to the station that night using my keys to enter after hours. Bill's old desk had been mine since his retirement, but I'd never noticed the false back in the bottom drawer. Behind it was a leather journal, thick with age and swollen with inserted documents, photographs, and handwritten notes dating back to the 1940s. The journal told a story that official history had forgotten or suppressed. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park hadn't been established just to preserve natural beauty. It had been created to contain something. The government knew about the thin spots, the places where reality was permeable. The park was a cover, a way to control access while maintaining plausible deniability. There were photographs that shouldn't exist, images from the 1950s showing military personnel in hazmat suits investigating areas that were now popular hiking trails. Reports of dimensional incursions that read like science fiction, but were stamped with official Department of Defense headers. And maps, detailed topographical maps showing not just the physical landscape, but what one researcher had termed ontological elevation. Places where the fabric of existence itself rose and fell like terrestrial mountains. Klingman's Dome was the highest peak not just in physical elevation, but in ontological terms. It was, quite literally, the closest point to other realities in the eastern United States. The most disturbing discovery was a series of photographs from 1962. They showed what appeared to be a failed military operation. Soldiers frozen mid-stride, their faces twisted in expressions of horror, their bodies partially merged with trees and rocks as if reality had stuttered during their existence. The only survivor's report was heavily redacted, but one line remained clear. They tried to force their way through. The mountain wouldn't let them. It made examples of them. I was so absorbed in reading that I didn't notice the temperature dropping until I could see my breath. The fluorescent lights in the office began to flicker, and through the window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The sky above Klingman's Dome was wrong. Where stars should have been, there were geometric patterns of light, shifting and rotating in ways that hurt to look at directly. And from the mountain itself, a beam of pale light stretched upward, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost like breathing. My radio, which I hadn't even turned on, crackled to life. Through the static came a voice I recognized but couldn't quite place. "David, help us. The door is opening, from both sides now." It was Jennifer Walsh. But Jennifer Walsh had never existed. I'd erased her along with all the others when I'd induced the amnesia. She was a casualty of a timeline that had been overwritten. Yet, here was her voice. Impossible and undeniable. I gathered Bill's journal and everything else I could carry and headed for Klingman's Dome. The drive up was surreal. The road seemed to stretch and contract, distances becoming meaningless. My headlights illuminated things that shouldn't be there. Structures that looked like they were made of crystallized time. Trees that grew downward into the sky. Shadows that fell upward. The parking area was chaos. A dozen ranger vehicles were already there, their lights creating a barrier of illumination against the encroaching wrongness. Tyler Morrison was trying to coordinate a response, but half the rangers were standing transfixed, staring at the light beam rising from the mountain. "Carson!" Tyler shouted when he saw me. "What the hell is happening?" People are reporting seeing dead relatives on the trails. Hikers are walking into the woods and disappearing. And that, he pointed at the beam of light, started about an hour ago. The newlyweds, James and Patricia Winters, they were alive and well, living in Knoxville, with 3 kids and no memory of ever hiking in the Smokies during their honeymoon. "We went to Gatlinburg," Patricia told me when I tracked them down. "Did all the tourist stuff, Dollywood, dinner shows, that kind of thing." "Why do you ask?" I couldn't explain. "How do you tell someone they once disappeared into an interdimensional rift, but now they didn't because you erased the memory of their disappearance from reality itself?" Bill retired 6 months after my accident. On his last day, he pulled me aside. "Whatever you don't remember," he said carefully, "maybe it's better that way. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. Some questions shouldn't be asked. And some sacrifices—" He paused, looking up toward Klingman's dome, visible in the distance. "Some sacrifices change the world in ways we can't understand." He handed me an envelope. "Don't open this unless you really need to. Unless things start to go wrong again." I still have that envelope, unopened. It sits in my desk drawer, a constant reminder of the summer I lost and the people who may or may not have existed. Because here's the thing about reality. It's more fragile than we think. It's not solid and unchangeable. It's more like a story we're all telling together, and if enough people forget a part of that story, it's like it never happened. But sometimes, especially on foggy mornings when the mountains are shrouded in that blue haze they're famous for, I stand at the Klingman's Dome observation tower and look out over the ridges. And I swear I can see them. Faint outlines of structures that shouldn't exist, shadows of people who were never there, echoes of a reality that got erased. The Cherokee have a saying, "The mountains have eyes." They mean it metaphorically, usually, that the natural world is watching us, judging our actions. But I think maybe they knew something more. Maybe they knew that sometimes the mountains see things that we forget, that the land itself remembers what we cannot. I've been back to the area above Klingman's Dome many times since then. It's just a normal forest now, beautiful, wild, but normal. Hikers traverse it freely. Researchers study the Fraser firs without incident. Children play in clearings that I'm almost certain didn't exist before. But every once in a while, usually when I'm alone up there, I'll find something that doesn't quite fit. A tree growing in a perfect spiral, a rock formation that looks almost carved, a sound on the wind that might be singing in a language that was never human. And I wonder, did I save those people by forgetting them, or did I condemn them to something worse than death? Complete non-existence? Did I close a door that needed closing, or did I simply paint over it, leaving the danger still there, just hidden from view? The envelope from Bill sat in my drawer for 3 years before things started to go wrong again. It began subtly in the fall of 1997. Rangers started reporting equipment failures in the high elevation areas. Compasses spinning wildly, radios picking up transmissions that shouldn't exist, GPS units showing impossible coordinates. At first, we attributed it to solar flare activity, or some kind of magnetic anomaly. Then came the dreams. Every ranger who worked the Klingman's Dome area began having the same nightmare. standing in a forest that was both familiar and alien, watching shadows move between trees that grew in impossible patterns, and hearing voices calling from somewhere just out of sight. We'd wake up with the same phrase echoing in our minds: "The configuration is incomplete." I wasn't the only one who noticed. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a psychologist the Park Service brought in to address what they termed elevation-induced stress disorders, pulled me aside after a group session. "David," she said, her usually professional demeanor cracking slightly, "I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Collective dreams don't happen, not with this level of detail and consistency. What aren't you people telling me about this place?" I wanted to tell her everything, but what could I say? That I had memories of memories I'd lost, that reality itself might be thinner here than anywhere else in the world. Instead, I gave her the company line about altitude and isolation affecting the human psyche. But that night, I opened Bill's envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Bill's cramped handwriting. "Carson, if you're reading this, then it's starting again. What you did in '94 didn't destroy them, it only severed their connection temporarily. Think of it like cutting a plant at the stem while leaving the roots intact. Given enough time, it will grow back. It's a dimensional breach," I said, surprised by my own calmness. "Reality is becoming unstable." "How do you know that?" I held up Bill's journal. "Because this has happened before. And because I remember things that never happened." Before Tyler could respond, the ground shook. Not like an earthquake. More like reality itself was having a seizure. For a moment, I saw double, triple, multiple versions of everything overlapping. I saw Klingman's dome as it was, as it had been, and as it could be, all existing simultaneously. In one version, the observation tower was a twisted spire of organic metal reaching into a purple sky. In another, it didn't exist at all, replaced by a massive tree whose branches held glowing fruit. In yet another, it was a temple to something vast and incomprehensible, with architecture that folded in on itself infinitely. Then the moment passed, and we were back in our single, stable reality. But I knew it wouldn't last. "Evacuate everyone," I told Tyler. "Clear the entire area for at least 5 miles. Do it now." "On whose authority?" "On the authority of someone who knows what's coming," I said, already heading for the trail to the observation tower. "And Tyler?" "If I don't come back, burn Bill's journal. Don't read it, just burn it." The hike up to Klingman's dome usually takes about 30 minutes. That night it took both forever and no time at all. The trail kept shifting. Sometimes I was walking uphill, sometimes down, sometimes sideways along a vertical surface. The beam of light grew stronger as I approached, and I could hear it now, a harmony of impossible sounds that made my teeth ache and my eyes water. The observation tower, when I finally reached it, was the eye of the storm. Everything around it was chaos, reality fracturing and reforming constantly. But the tower itself remained stable, a concrete and steel anchor in a sea of dimensional turbulence. At the top of the tower, standing at the center of the beam of light, was Jennifer Walsh. But it wasn't the Jennifer I remembered from 1994. This Jennifer was older, scarred, and her eyes held the weight of experiences that no human should have. She was wearing ranger gear, but it was wrong. The fabric seemed to be woven from solidified light, and the badge on her chest showed a symbol that hurt to look at directly. "Hello, David," she said, her voice carrying despite the cacophony around us. "I've been waiting for you." We all have. Behind her, figures began to materialize from the light. All the missing hikers, all the people I'd erased from existence. But like Jennifer, they were changed. They moved wrong, existed wrong, as if they were only partially present in our reality. You didn't save us, Jennifer continued. You didn't condemn us. You transformed us. When you erased our existence from this reality, we didn't disappear. We shifted. We became citizens of the between space, the dimensional membrane that separates worlds. Marcus Thompson stepped forward, his form flickering between solid and translucent. We've been holding them back, David. The entities you encountered, we've been fighting them, keeping them from breaking through. But we're losing. The membrane is wearing thin. What do you need me to do? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Someone has to go through completely, Jennifer said. Someone with a strong enough connection to both realities to seal the breach permanently. You're the only one who remembers both timelines, the only one who exists fully in this reality while carrying the memory of the other. She held out her hand. It's a one-way trip. Once you cross over, you can never come back. You'll become like us, a guardian of the boundary, forever preventing things that shouldn't exist from entering a world where they don't belong. I thought about my life as a ranger, the quiet years of protecting the park, helping lost hikers, maintaining trails. It had been a good life, a simple life. But I'd also seen what was at stake. If the entities broke through completely, if they established their anchors in our reality, the entire world would become like the Forbidden Zone, a place where the laws of physics were suggestions, where human consciousness couldn't survive intact. What about the people here? I asked. The other rangers, the tourists. Once the door is sealed, they'll forget, Marcus said. Just like they forgot us. The timeline will restructure itself. To them, you'll have died in a hiking accident, or retired to Florida, or never existed at all. Reality will find a way to make sense of your absence. I looked back down the mountain. In the distance, I could see the lights of Gatlinburg, the sprawl of humanity living their lives, unaware that reality itself was under threat. I thought about Tyler and the other rangers, about the families who came to the park seeking beauty and peace. Will it hurt? I asked. Jennifer's expression softened. The crossing? Number. It's like stepping from one room to another. But David, you need to know, existence on the other side is different. We're not fully human anymore. We're something else, something between. We remember being human, but the feelings, the connections, they're muted. It's like watching your life through frosted glass. But you're protecting everyone? Every moment of every day, she confirmed. It's our purpose now. Our only purpose. I made my decision. I stepped toward Jennifer, reaching for her outstretched hand. The moment our fingers touched, I felt the pull. Not violent, but inexorable, like gravity had suddenly shifted 90 degrees. The world began to fade, colors bleaching out, sounds becoming distant. But then something unexpected happened. The beam of light flickered and began to contract. The entities, those tall, impossible beings I'd encountered in 1994, suddenly appeared around us, their forms more solid than I'd ever seen them. No, one of them projected, its mental voice filled with something like desperation. The configuration must not be completed. If you seal the door, both realities will stabilize permanently. We will be trapped in our dying universe. Jennifer's grip tightened on my hand. They're lying. We are not lying, the entity interrupted. We are trying to survive, yes, but not through invasion, through merger. Your kind and ours becoming something new, something that can exist in both realities without destroying either. I hesitated, caught between Jennifer's pull and the entity's words. David, don't listen to them, Marcus urged. They've had 60 years to try cooperation. Instead, they took people, used them as anchors. Because we didn't understand, the entity replied. Your reality is so different from ours. We thought we needed to force our way through. But your action in 1994, erasing the anchors, it taught us something. Memory and consciousness are more fluid than we believed. They can be shared, not stolen. Then why the breach now? I demanded. Why the chaos? Because our reality is collapsing faster than anticipated. We have perhaps days before everything we are ceases to exist. We're not trying to invade. We're refugees seeking asylum in the only place we can survive. I looked at Jennifer, then at the entities, then back at the world below. 3 choices. Seal the door and condemn an entire species to extinction, let them through and risk the destruction of our reality, or... There's a third option, I said, the idea forming even as I spoke. What if we don't close the door or leave it open? What if we transform it? Everyone, human and otherwise, turned to look at me. The Forbidden Zone was wrong because it was a wound between realities, I continued. But what if it became a bridge instead? A controlled space where both realities could coexist without contaminating each other. Jennifer shook her head. That's impossible. The energies involved are already here, I interrupted. The mountain itself is the highest ontological point in the East. It wants to be a connection. We've just been fighting against its nature. I pulled out Bill's journal, flipping to a diagram I'd noticed earlier. A map of global thin spots. Look, these places exist all over the world. What if they're not accidents or wounds? What if they're supposed to be connection points, but we've been treating them as threats instead of opportunities? One of the entities moved closer, its form solidifying slightly. You propose coexistence, a shared space? More than that, I said, warming to the idea. A transformation. Those who choose to could become bridges themselves, part human, part whatever you are. Able to exist in both realities, preventing conflict by understanding both sides. Like us, Jennifer said quietly, understanding dawning in her eyes. We're already transformed. We exist between worlds. But you were forced into it, I said. What if people could choose? What if, instead of random disappearances and terror, there was a conscious decision to become something more? The entity's form pulsed, and I sensed communication happening beyond my perception. The entities discussing among themselves at speeds beyond human comprehension. Finally, it spoke again. This would require trust. Your kind would need to accept that we exist, that we are not threats, but potential allies. Can your species handle such knowledge? I thought about humanity's history, our fear of the unknown, our tendency toward violence when confronted with difference. But I also thought about our capacity for wonder, our ability to adapt, our endless curiosity about the universe. Not all of them, I admitted. Not at first, but some will. And over time, as the bridge keepers prove that coexistence is possible, more will follow. And if they don't? Jennifer asked. If humanity rejects this, then we maintain the status quo, I said. The door stays controlled, limited. But at least we'll have tried something better than endless conflict or mutual annihilation. The decision to transform Klingman's dome into a bridge between worlds wasn't made that night. It took weeks of negotiation, carried out in dreams and visions, in moments when reality grew thin enough for communication to pass between our world and theirs. I became the primary negotiator, existing in a strange state between fully human and something else. Each time I entered the zone around Klingman's dome, I could feel myself changing slightly, becoming more attuned to the frequencies of both realities. My eyes began to see colors that didn't have names. My ears picked up harmonics that shouldn't exist in our physics. The Park Service, surprisingly, was easier to convince than I'd expected. It turned out that the higher echelons of government had always known about the thin spots. They had contingency plans for invasion, for contamination, for reality breakdown, but no one had ever proposed cooperation before. General Patricia Hayes, who headed the classified division that dealt with what they termed ontological anomalies, met with me in a bunker beneath the Sugarlands Visitor Center that I hadn't even known existed. "You're proposing we intentionally allow interdimensional beings to establish a foothold in our reality," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "I'm proposing we accept that they're already here," I corrected. "They've been trying to break through for decades, maybe centuries. We can keep fighting a losing battle, or we can try to find common ground. And these bridge keepers you mention, humans who would volunteer to be transformed, you realize what you're asking people to give up." I thought about Jennifer and the others, existing in their strange half-state between worlds. I do, but I also know that throughout history there have always been those willing to sacrifice their normal lives for something greater. Explorers, astronauts, researchers who spend years in isolation. This is just the next frontier. General Hayes studied me for a long moment. "You've already started changing, haven't you? You're becoming one of them." I looked at my hands. They looked normal enough, but sometimes, in the right light, I could see through them to the quantum foam beneath. "Yes, but I'm still human enough to advocate for humanity." The first public acknowledgement came 6 months later, though it was carefully managed. The Park Service announced a new research area around Klingman's Dome, where atmospheric anomalies were being studied. They recruited volunteers from various fields: physicists, biologists, philosophers, even artists, people who could approach the unknown from different angles. Dr. Sarah Kim was one of the first volunteers. A quantum physicist from MIT, she had theorized about parallel universes her entire career. When she learned that her theories were not just real but accessible, she jumped at the chance to study them firsthand. "The mathematics are beautiful," she told me after her first exposure to the zone. "Our reality and theirs, they're not separate. They're harmonics of the same fundamental frequency, like two notes that create a chord when played together." The transformation process was gradual for the volunteers. Each exposure to the zone changed them slightly, their consciousness expanding to encompass both realities. Some couldn't handle it. The human mind wasn't designed to process multiple dimensional states simultaneously, but those who could adapt became something remarkable. Marcus Thompson, who had been one of the original missing hikers transformed during my amnesia event, became a guide for the new bridge keepers. "It's like learning to see with new eyes," he explained to a group of volunteers. "At first, everything is overwhelming, but gradually you learn to filter, to focus, to exist in both states without losing yourself." The entities, for their part, kept their bargain. They no longer tried to force their way through or take unwilling anchors. Instead, they shared their knowledge, their perspective on reality that was so fundamentally different from ours, that it revolutionized our understanding of physics, consciousness, and existence itself. One entity, which had taken to calling itself Echo for our benefit, became something like an ambassador. It couldn't fully manifest in our reality without causing distortions, but it could project a form that humans could interact with. A shifting, translucent figure that looked like it was made of crystallized light. "Your species fears change," Echo told me during one of our regular meetings at the Boundary. "But change is the nature of existence. We learned this when our reality began to collapse. We tried to resist, to maintain what was, and nearly destroyed ourselves. Only by accepting transformation could we survive. And now you're helping us transform," I noted. "Mutual benefit," Echo replied. Your reality gives us stability, a foundation to rebuild upon. Our perspective gives you access to dimensions of existence you couldn't imagine. Together, we become more than either could be alone. The real test came when the first hybrid being was born. Not transformed, but actually born from parents who were both bridge keepers. The child, named Aurora by her parents, existed naturally in both realities. She didn't need to learn to see both worlds. She simply did. Watching her play was surreal. Sometimes she would reach for toys that existed in our reality, sometimes for ones that existed in theirs, treating both as equally real and accessible. She's what we're evolving toward, Dr. Kim observed, watching Aurora stack blocks that phased between dimensions. Not human, not entity, but something new. Public reaction when the truth finally became too obvious to hide was mixed. There were protests, of course. Religious groups declared it the end times. Scientists argued about the implications. Philosophers debated what it meant to be human if humanity was no longer a fixed state. But there were also those who embraced it. Artists came to the zone to experience colors and sounds that didn't exist in baseline reality. Musicians composed symphonies that could only be fully heard by bridge keepers. Writers tried to capture in words experiences that transcended language. The transformation of Klingman's dome became a model for other thin spots around the world. The Bermuda Triangle became a research station where the laws of physics could be bent and studied. The Devil's Sea off Japan became a cultural exchange point, where human and entity art merged into something unprecedented. Not everyone chose to transform. Most of humanity continued their lives unchanged, aware of, but not directly interacting with the new reality. But the option was there, for those who wanted it. To become more than human, to experience existence from a fundamentally different perspective. I made my full transition 3 years after that night on Klingman's dome. The process was gentler than I'd expected, less like dying and more like waking up from a dream of limitation. I could still interact with baseline humans, but it required effort, like focusing on one conversation in a crowded room while aware of all the others. Jennifer was there to guide me through the final transformation. She had become something like a leader among the bridge keepers, helping others navigate their new existence. The hardest part, she told me as I adjusted to my new perception, is letting go of the illusion of separation. We think of ourselves as individuals, distinct and isolated. But from this perspective, you can see how we're all connected. Not just humans to humans, but everything to everything. The entities aren't invaders or others. They're just a different expression of the same universal consciousness. Do you miss it? I asked, being purely human. She considered this. I miss the simplicity sometimes. The ability to believe that what you see is all there is. But would you go back to seeing in black and white after experiencing color? Would you choose deafness after hearing music? The forbidden zone above Klingman's dome no longer exists, not because it's been destroyed, but because it's been transformed into something else. It's now called the Convergence, a place where realities meet and merge, where humans and entities work together to explore the infinite possibilities of existence. Tour groups visit regularly, though they're kept to the safer, more stable areas. Children on school field trips press their faces against the observation windows, watching bridge keepers phase between dimensions, seeing the impossible architecture of the entity structures that exist parallel to our own. Some of those children will grow up to become bridge keepers themselves. Others will become scientists studying the new physics, artists inspired by impossible beauty, or simply humans living in a universe that's far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. The entity's reality did collapse, as they'd predicted, but instead of dying, they integrated into ours, adding their dimension to our own like a new color to the spectrum. Reality became richer, more complex, but also more stable. The two universes supporting each other like the pillars of a bridge. There are still dangers. There are still those, human and entity alike, who oppose the merger, who want to return to separation or achieve domination. The bridge keepers serve as peacekeepers as much as explorers, maintaining the balance between worlds. Sometimes I return to the observation tower, now rebuilt with materials that exist in both realities simultaneously. I stand there, watching the sun set over mountains that exist in multiple dimensions at once, seeing the tourists below and the entity structures above, the human city of Gatlinburg and the crystalline entity settlements occupying the same space in different phases. Tyler Morrison visits sometimes. He never made the full transformation, choosing to remain primarily human, but he's supportive of what we've become. "You saved us all, you know," he told me once. Not by closing the door or opening it, but by changing what a door could be. "I didn't do it alone," I replied. "It took all of us, human and entity, transformed and baseline, choosing to trust rather than fear." "Still," he said, looking out at the transformed landscape, "it started with you. With your willingness to forget everything to save others, and then to remember enough to save everyone." The envelope Bill left me still exists, though its contents have been added to the public record now. His journal has become a historical document, studied by those trying to understand how we got here. Bill himself, I learned, had suspected something like this might be possible. His final entry, which I hadn't noticed before, simply said, "Perhaps the answer isn't to guard the door, but to change what's on both sides of it." As for the missing hikers from all those years, the ones who disappeared before the transformation, they're all here in one form or another. Some, like Jennifer and Marcus, became bridge keepers. Others chose to return to baseline humanity, their time in the between space becoming like a half-remembered dream. A few went further, joining completely with the entities, becoming pure consciousness unbound by physical form. We gave them all the choice. That's what makes us different from what came before. Choice. The entities took people against their will. We offer transformation to those who seek it. The old reality was imposed on everyone. The new one is opt-in. There are other thin spots being discovered all the time. Each one is unique, leading to different realities with different entities, different laws of physics, different ways of existing. Humanity, or what humanity is becoming, stands at the threshold of infinite exploration. But it all started here in the Great Smoky Mountains, at a place that was once forbidden and is now a gateway. Where fear once kept us apart, curiosity now brings us together. Where there was once a wound between worlds, there is now a bridge. I still dream sometimes of that night in 1994 when I first entered the Forbidden Zone. I remember the terror, the confusion, the desperate choice to forget everything to save everyone. But now, from my expanded perspective, I can see that it was all necessary. Every step, every choice, every sacrifice led us to this moment of transformation. The mountains still have their secrets. There are depths to the merger that we're only beginning to explore. Implications we're only starting to understand. But for the first time in human history, we're not exploring alone. We have partners, guides, fellow travelers who see reality from angles we never imagined. Some people ask me if I regret my transformation, if I miss being fully human. The question always surprises me because from my current perspective, I haven't lost my humanity. I've expanded it. I'm still David Carson, former park ranger, protector of these mountains. I still care about the safety of hikers, the preservation of nature, the wonder of discovery. But now I do it from a perspective that encompasses multiple realities. The Great Smoky Mountains are still beautiful. The blue haze still rises from the valleys in the morning. The seasons still change. The tourists still come to experience the majesty of nature. But now they come for something more as well. To witness the place where humanity took its next evolutionary step, where we chose connection over isolation, understanding over fear. The forbidden zone is gone, but in its place is something far more valuable. A reminder that the unknown doesn't have to be feared, that the other doesn't have to be enemy, and that sometimes the best way to protect what we love is not to build walls, but to build bridges. As I stand here now, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, watching the sun set in our reality while observing the geometric light patterns of the entity realm, I know that our journey has just begun. There are infinite realities to explore, infinite ways of existing to understand, infinite possibilities for what we might become. But it all started with a choice: to enter the forbidden zone, to face the unknown, to risk everything for the chance of something better. And in the end, that's what makes us human, regardless of what form we take. The courage to step into the darkness, hoping to find light. The forbidden zone above Klingman's dome no longer exists. In its place is a doorway to infinite possibilities, and we're all invited to walk through. If you're watching this from somewhere in these ancient mountains, remember that you're standing at a crossroads between worlds. The Cherokee knew it, the entities discovered it, and now we're all learning to navigate it together. The Great Smoky Mountains aren't just a national park anymore. They're a bridge to the future of consciousness itself. And if you listen carefully on a quiet morning, when the mist rises from the valleys and the first light touches Klingman's dome, you might hear it. The harmony of two realities learning to sing together, creating something beautiful and strange and absolutely impossible. Welcome to the new world. It's been waiting for you.